All right. Welcome, friends. So grateful to have you here. We're super excited for this call as part of our staple crop series. This is a community collaboration. These are intended to be uh, community dialogues and conversations. And so we really encourage you to participate um, in the chats and raise your hand. We do want to go through a couple tech checks before we really dig in and introduce our amazing presenters for the day. So as you join in, letting you all know that language access is really critical to the success of the work that we do together on our farms and in our community. So if you or a producer that you're working with or joining this call will benefit from some language support or interpretation services, please let us know. We always try to make sure that these accommodations are available as you request them. And today we will be interpreting in Hmong as well as English. So we wanted to just guide you through this Zoom screen to make sure that you can join us in the appropriate language. So at the very bottom, you will see a toolbar. If you're joining in from your computer, you will be able to select three dots and more and find an interpretation tab where you'll be able to select English or Hmong. We encourage you to choose this now, and we will be recording in both languages for folks that are unable to attend. Have any questions, please add them to the chat. We can help guide you as we engage together. Another important piece of our staple crop programming is that we've practiced some community guidelines. And so through every call that you attend, every field day you join, every conversation you participate in, our project partners and farmers are committed and invite you all to hold the following relationship guidelines in this space. So we ask that you put relationships first, practice trust and respect privacy, create space for multiple truths and norms, notice power dynamics, and most importantly, stay grounded in our common community goals. So if you haven't joined us before, this is our Staple Crops community call. We are here together to know each other and build a shared understanding of what staple crops are for our farming and community folks. And so this doesn't follow a universal definition. One place that we start at is that staple crops for us provide a foundational food source. They bring dense caloric nutritional value. Crops that possess inherent characteristics for extra storage through the season, and also crops that can be distributed across our growing area and food systems. And we think that these food crops are really vital for enhancing our food security and fostering the stability within our agricultural communities. Some of these can include grains, legumes and beans, other pulses, starchy roots or tuber crops, and oil seeds. But we know that staples are different for every person, family, and community. And so we really are excited to welcome you in to share what are some of these staples for you. So in the chat, we want to kick our call off with a welcome and let us know where you're calling in from, if you have a farm business or you're thinking about farming, and any curiosities you have about staple crops. While you all share a little bit about you so our presenters know who's in the room. I do want to introduce our project partners who are here also to support you in learning and growing some of these crops on your farm and in your communities. I'll just quickly say, because I always forget at the beginning, I'm Christine, and I'm a farmer education coordinator at Michael Fields Agricultural Institute. We work in Southeast Wisconsin, but work with farmers across the upper Midwest. I'm going to ask our partners to wave, and if you want to come off mute and say hello, please do, depending on how you're feeling today. We've got Hagen from the Michigan Food and Farming Systems. They're located in Michigan and serving farmers in southern Michigan as well as across the state. Fresh from Fisher Together and Chicago Bread Club. They're calling in from the south suburbs of Chicago. Is that an accurate location, Fresh? You're all over the place. They own and operate Fresher Together, which is a farm, as well as organized for Chicago Bread Club and serve farmers in Illinois as well as northern Indiana. And Stephen, who is calling in from Milwaukee, is the farm director at Fondy Food Center and Farm in Milwaukee, hosting and supporting farmers on their incubator farmland as well as at their farmers market. So a very quick hello to all of us, and we're seeing some hellos in the chat, familiar faces and new faces. So grateful you're here. Okay, I will just add, if you're interested in learning more or getting some direct support from our partners, please send us a note at any time. We're really grateful that you're here. Okay. Just a deep breath in, reading some of these responses, and gratitude for you all being here. A question we have for you all is, what is your experience with sorghum? So we'd love for you to also use the chat here. I was going to launch a poll, but sometimes that feels silly and messy. And so we just want to, again, encourage you that this is a conversation and inviting folks in. So I'm going to give a couple minutes here if anyone wants to share or shout out your experience with sorghum as a food crop. We're interested if this is brand new to you, you've never grown it before, you have some curiosities, or you've seen it in the field, you have grown it before, grown it in the past, or you are a producer and this is a top priority crop for you. So please come off mute and we'll try to share verbally if anyone has experience here. One folk is saying, grew it one time, looking to grow it again, needing space. Have not grown but eaten it. Our farms are small. We grow sweet potatoes and corn. Some folks grow sorghum for soil health and animal feed, and curious about growing it for humans. Decorative crops, I'm there with you, Leighton. And growing small scale, but sorghum could be a priority. Okay. So as we move into our presentation, I do just want to again encourage everyone to use the chat, engage. Our partners here are going to be watching those, and I'll be doing my best to also share some questions with our speakers as we move forward, but we will have time at the end of this kind of connection and conversation and dialogue between our invited guests as well as you all to ask some more in-depth questions and answer anything that might come up for you today. So I'm going to very briefly introduce our speakers because they're going to do a better job than I will. I'd love to introduce Chelsea Askew, who's growing in Georgia as a fourth generation farmer, has had a lot of emphasis on regionally adapted crops in Southern Appalachia and began their relationship with sorghum in 2016. We have Jon Kasza, organic producer in Hudson Valley of New York State, growing at home farm. He's committed to growing food at scale for community, but also focused on seed sovereignty, where folks are able to have control over the futures of their crops. And Jalal, also growing in the Hudson Valley, is currently, excuse me, has experience in growing for community-supported agriculture and gleaning projects, and is now the owner and operator of Sweet Freedom Farm, growing vegetables, grains, herbs, and maple syrup that prioritizes folks impacted by the prison system. I would love to share Jalal and Jon's slides, if you guys thought, and introduce themselves. Here we go. Give me 1 second to do that, and you all please unmute and say hello.
I'm John. I'm have home farm, but I also work with Jalal. We've worked together for several years since 2020. Um, and I think we planted our first sorghum plants in 2021 together, right?
Yeah, either 2020 or 2021.
Yeah.
And they died. They died back. It was an early frost that year.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Everything died.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
But yeah, so we didn't give up, obviously. We're still here. So don't give up out there. Yeah. You can
Can you
go.
see your slides okay? Should we go ahead?
Yeah. We
Okay.
can next slide. Um, yeah, so Sweet Freedom, it's 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 actually a nonprofit farm. So I'm the executive director. And yeah, we started as a project where um we were growing for folks inside prison. So like some of our elders, really like former Black Panthers that were incarcerated, we were getting them food, and then they wanted us to get families up to the prisons because there wasn't really transportation. So somehow farmers got a old veggie bus and started bringing families up to prisons and giving them food from our farm and different farms in the region. Um, and so we started doing that work and then transitioned during the pandemic to fully focusing on Sweet Freedom. Um, but the whole time that we were doing Sweet Freedom, the vision for me was to have like a pancake farm, because a lot of that history around maple syrup, which we started doing, and sorghum syrup is there's a abolition movement that was built around kind of like a boycott of the regular sugar slavery industry, or like the sugar plantation industry that depended on slave labor, and only supporting alternative local maple syrup, apple syrup, and sorghum syrup. Um, yeah. And and so like this slide is saying we are currently growing on two sites. Um, we're in Germantown, New York, and in Millerton, New York. Um, and yeah, this is a slide of us doing maple syrup in Millerton. That was yeah, back in the day when we had a really just like military tent. We used that for a long time, and that was just like a temporary setup. And now we have a more solid situation where we're growing, and we have like a actual sugar shack with the upgraded evaporator. Um, and the thing about doing maple and sorghum syrup is like the fact they use a lot of the same equipment. And so we've been able to use, because we're doing maple syrup, use the same kind of like cooking process with the maple equipment. Um, and even like the filtering and bottle equipment, a lot of those equipments are like the same thing. Just that the only difference is that we actually are growing the sorghum throughout the year, and we've been able to kind of, you know, do both at, throughout different times of the year. And really the when we have a bad maple year, we can tell like when we need to do more sorghum. Um, the next slide. Um, yeah, I think I spoke to this part. This is just a picture of us in the field in Millerton. Um, these are some pictures of us building the Sugar Shack in 2020. It was definitely like a volunteer year, but um, this is where we started. This picture is um, during the pandemic. Like I said, we couldn't continue to bring families up, and so we pivoted to doing a free farm stand outside of Sing Sing. So that's a picture of our free farm stand. Next slide. Um, and so, yeah, this is a picture of our land in Germantown. Throughout the last 6 years, we've been growing a lot for food access programs, food banks, and mutual aid programs on top of the prison work. This is a slide of some farmers visiting. We had like a group of pollinators from Rocksteady coming and just hosting folks. So we host monthly gatherings and education and work days on our farm. Next slide. Why sorghum? Uh, you want-
No, I guess I'll just offer like yeah. So when we kind of Jalal was doing Maple and during 2020, uh, his phone was just ringing off the hook with all the contacts in the city because the demand on food pantries was so high. So we ended up kind of relaunching the vegetable operation at Sweet Freedom as an emergency food response during the pandemic. Um, And when we met and started working together, one of the things we immediately bonded about was sorghum because I'd come from another farm that grew it down in Maryland and had been interested in it as a staple crop with the climate changing. And Jalal, with his pancake farm vision and his and like highlighted sorghum as a culturally relevant crop for the African diaspora. And so we immediately started experimenting with varieties and methods of growing. Um, yeah, I think what else?
Yeah, I think, like we said, we really wanted to um, grow more like culturally relevant grain. I think knowing some of that history around sorghum, it was definitely resonating with us, and um, yeah, we wanted to have that continue, but also do more education around it. I think, like I said, our first year doing it, it didn't work out, and I think a lot of times the people that we talked to in our region were like, "Yeah, you can't grow it.
Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it." So we got a lot of like discouragement around growing it initially, and um, yeah, I think I don't know. We just kept going. I don't know why, but yeah, you can go to the next two slides.
Like, I ask one question while we're here?
Sure.
You both have said it, and we've said it a lot. Um, how do you define a staple crop? Like, what does that mean to you? Why is it important to like maybe a little bit harder to make sure that these crops exist on your farm?
Yeah, I mean, I really, and I think I would say like Jalal's, we intersect on this point, which is like, vegetables are great and like they're often the entry point for a lot of first generation farmers, including the two of us. But vegetables are vegetables are not what feeds the human population. Grain is what feeds the human population. And so we've really dialed in on uh, thinking about what else are we going to eat past vegetables and like how can we get food to folks that doesn't spoil as quickly, particularly with Sweet Freedom's mission around feeding folks inside and feeding like marginalized communities. Um, Being able to grow staple crops, I would say is I mean that's why that's so important, I think, is because it offers something besides lettuce and kale and like those are great things, but we know that 67% of the human diet is from five crops and they're all grains. So I think defining a staple, define for me a staple is like that thing that actually is the majority of your calories.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think for us, like John was saying, I think we were trying to do staples, I think just because we're trying to do things on a scale too. And for us, like, yeah, the food that can go inside, there's not a lot of food that can go inside. So trying to get the staple crops that folks needed. Um, so like garlic, onions, if potatoes can't go inside, but if potatoes could go inside, like how do we get potatoes inside? Cabbages, the grains, some of like those basic crops, I feel like beans, grains that really like give us some calories is why we were doing it. On top of the cultural connection, um, which is really important for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, like there's this underlying assumption in a lot of folks in the farming movement that I've interacted with, which is like, oh, the system's gonna collapse at some point. And I think something I've come to understand in the last few years is like for a lot of people, the system collapsed a long time ago. And like this is a way to try to circumvent those problems, or circumvent that collapse and say like, how can we get like if we can get beans to somebody that's inside, that's gonna be one of the healthiest things that they can eat. So, and I think I maybe we're talking a little bit fast for our interpreter. I'm going to try to slow down. Um, are we taking questions, Christine?
Yeah,
I-
yeah, let's take a question. Maze, if you want to unmute, and then we'll move forward with Jalal and John's presentation, and then yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, I can wait. I had understood from the chat that I could ask.
We're open to it. This is yeah, we're having a conversation about it. So, if you want to put it in the chat, but let's address it right now.
Okay, cool. Um, Exciting hearing you guys talking about sorghum. I really relate to the reasons for growing it. I'm actually literally eating sorghum dosas, which are just like
Oh yeah.
really good Indian pancakes as from sorghum I grew as we're talking. So I'm like, yes, pancake farm. Um, I was just curious about like what equipment that you're using to juice the sorghum right now.
Yeah. Can we say don't touch that dial and we'll get to that in a minute?
Yes, we will get to that.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, we'll talk. If you want to go to next slide after this.
Oh yeah, we kind of talked about that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is just a picture of our first year growing it out at a larger scale. Um I think this was after the dieback year.
Yeah.
And then this is yeah, we grew a few different varieties this year. Some of them were syrup varieties, some of them were grain varieties. Um, and some of them were like a little bit of both. So yeah, it was great. It was um as you can see that I'm 6'5". So I'm here 6'5", so it's obviously I'm looking up at the sorghum. Um, for the most part, I feel like the seed has developed
Yeah.
Some of them didn't as much as we would like. And this year, we didn't have a lot of equipment. And so for us, we processed really just on some hard cloth. We didn't have any threshers. We just had like hard wire cloth that we put over a buckthorn bin and kind of just grated the sorghum heads over the bin to kind of clean it and thresh it out. And so that was the first time we like that's how we processed it initially. And I think we'll show a picture of the sorghum press that we had initially. It was just like a cane press. Um, yeah, these are some of the varieties. The seed heads that was the corsage seed head. Um, it didn't get tall, but the seed head really developed really well. Um, and yeah, coral and rocks orange were some of the coral were some of the grain varieties and the syrup varieties. Um,
Yeah, so that that was our first big grow out. That was at a friend's farm. We transplanted everything, and we he kind of traced the rows for us, and we were able to transplant in a pattern where he could mechanically cultivate. So that took a lot of labor out for us, obviously. So we were able to grow. I think this was close to a quarter an acre or half an acre. We also got like 20 inches of rain that July or something, so that really helped everything kind of take off.
mm, mm.
And I guess I'll just a quick note on varieties. I'm sure Chelsea will talk more about sugar drip, which she grows. Um, but I wanted to highlight Rocks Orange. So Rocks Orange, as far as I remember, was part of a breeding program that was based in Wisconsin. There was an effort in the 40s or 50s to try to produce sugar in colder climates. And so Rocks Orange was bred as a short season sweet cane sorghum to try to have another crop to produce sugar in colder climates. Um, so that one does really well, as you can imagine, up here where it's cold in New York and in Wisconsin too, obviously. And we yeah, so we that first year we harvested. We had a volunteer day where people came out and they harvested. And like Jalal said, we had hardwire cloth, like metal mesh over bins, and just agitated the heads on the hardware cloth. And the um yeah, that's the thanks Fresh. Those are the folks from Evergrowing Family Farm.
Yeah.
This has really turned into like a community event. So the last 2 or 3 years, we've had I think over 100 people come out and participate.
Yeah, it's been really popular because we've been we'll have some slides around like how we've been growing it, but most of the harvesting has been by hand. And so we'll have about like 80 to like 100 people help us with a bunch of sickles, just like harvest by hand. And then we have a larger press. And so I think the goal for us every year is how to get more equipment to cultivate, to transplant, to cultivate, and to process um, more with like, yeah, a mechanical system. But I think this picture is kind of relating to the community cultural connection that we've been able to gather around sorghum. And so I feel like both pieces have been good for us to like focus on. And I think we don't want to like not continue to do it with that community effort. Um, but also the more we expand, we want to figure out how to like mix both of those efforts on like having community come through and like see the process, but making sure that we can have a mechanical growing it at a mechanical scale.
Yeah, so it's viable.
Yeah. So you
And
can skip the next, yeah.
oh yeah, those are yeah.
That's some of the sorghum pictures. This is what John is talking about some of our frost dates.
Yeah, I know that there's folks like in Wisconsin and Minnesota in the upper Midwest that, and I think you said Detroit too, Christine. So I wanted to include just kind of giving folks a sense of where we are. We're kind of right there where the Massachusetts Connecticut lines meet New York. We're
Yeah.
right there. So we're in the Hudson River Valley, so it's a little bit warmer because of the river, but it's still a short, relatively short season for growing sorghum. So I wanted to just put our frost dates on here and kind of what we're working with, so folks have a sense of what might be possible for them. And you can do the next slide. Yeah, warmer than Wisconsin because we have the water, I think, or more the Hudson River. Okay. Yeah, so the way that we kind of just like growing vegetables, we plant the sorghum in the greenhouse when it's still cold outside. We use 128 cell trays so that the plants have enough room to get kind of a healthy size to be able to transplant. Um, they do okay in 200 cells, but they are just like a bit bigger and easier to deal with when they're in 128s, and it gives us more flexibility on the transplanting window.
Yeah. You could probably do 72s, but it depends on like your spacing or like the space that you have in the greenhouse. We don't have that much space. Um, so I think, yeah. And for us, it's like just to get it like a few weeks head start. But
Yeah.
yeah.
You can do next slide. Yeah, so here's the notes on kind of how we and you get a sense of how we do the setup. So for those of you that are farmers and grow and are at a tractor scale, you can see you can see the width of the tractor wheels there that defines a bed, and then the rows are about 36 inches apart. And then so there's 36 inches between the rows, and then 1 foot in between each plant in the row. So it's more or less. I'm not a corn farmer, but more or less it's the same setup as corn. I think corn has moved to 30-inch rows. But yeah, so it gives plenty of time or gives enough space for the crop, but you also get a reasonable shading effect after the foliage has developed enough. And this is well, maybe our first, or I think it's only this is our first year um, mechanically cultivating like this. So it makes a huge difference to be able to do that. And
Yeah.
these are just the tools that we use. So there's just a really basic cultivation bar there with some S tines and hooks, and we that's what's the result of what you see in this photo, I guess is the way to say that. And this year, I think we're going to try to use a tine weeder as well, which is the other tool in that in that photo. And I'm hoping if folks don't know what a tine weeder is, it's definitely worth researching. We're going to try to um, bare fallow the bed. So like we'll prepare the bed and then we'll run over it with the tine weeder 2 weeks before we plant and then a week before we plant, and that will knock the weed bank back significantly. And then we're gonna see if we're gonna tine weed once it's planted. But um, yeah, we definitely don't know everything and are still learning and experimenting. So
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, this is a slide of the picture in the top is that sugar cane press that we had initially. That is like, yeah, you can either use that by hand. We hooked up an engine to that, and so we were able to press like a few leaves, and then we got a more, yeah, there's another like tabletop industrial one. And so for the first couple of years, we were using those as a way to press out the stalks to make syrup and like cook down the syrup juice. And then last year, on the next slide, shows a picture of our PTO press. Um, and so we were able to go from that sugarcane press that only did like one or two. Like if you tried to do like three, it would stop totally. So we went from only doing one or two stalks to doing like 20 stalks at a time with the PTO driven press. And so that's been a real like game changer for us as far as like processing. Um, Sorry, we're missing some of the questions in the chat. Um, And then, yeah.
Yes. So I just wanted to put a note in here about testing. So um, we're still definitely learning on the storage piece. Like right now, we have whatever grain we've grown and kept, we've just kept either in some kind of sealed plastic tote like we would use for vegetables, and we usually keep it in the walk-in through the winter time. But that's a problem that's going to arise for us as we continue to scale up, is figuring out how we can store like full 2,000 pound totes or like 1,000 pound totes or whatever the case may be. And then the other thing is, if you ever are as you scale up with this process, it's important to test for mold. So there's Don and aflatoxin are two of the molds that show up in grain farming. Um, Aflatoxin also shows up in corn, and Don, as I understand, is more prevalent with wheat. Um, but yeah, those are both different types of mold that you need to be aware of. And I put the name of the lab that we use, which is the University of Vermont. They have a small grains breeding program, and they test. You basically send them a 1 pound or like a quart size sample of your grain, and then they'll test the grain for moisture content, aflatoxin, Dawn,
Vomitoxin too, right?
yeah,
Oh,
and protein, crude protein. So it's definitely, when we've sold some, we've had to do that to make sure we could sell it. And I think seed sources. I just put a quick note here on seed sources for folks. Um, and yeah, so True Love Seeds, which I'm sure Chelsea will talk about, we got some of our initial seed stock from True Love, including Sugar Drip. Experimental Farm Network, Nate Kleinman and Dusty, I forget Dusty's last name. Um, they started that project several years ago, and sorghum has been a focus of their work. Ojama Seed Collective. We've gotten stuff from Great Lakes Staple Seeds. I think that's where we got Rocks Orange. And then we've gotten Fedco has a couple of sorghum varieties. And then I just saw today when I was researching that True Leaf Market, which they bought Kitazawa Seed Company. They also offer some sorghum varieties. So,
and there's a national
yeah.
sweet sorghum growers that has a lot of resources too. So I can share that website. Um, there's there's a lot of farmers in Kentucky that we got some more the sweet sorghum varieties from too. Um, but yeah, we can pause there. I think I saw a lot of questions around like direct seeding and cultivating,
Yeah.
but maybe Chelsea wants to go and then we can answer more questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to get Chelsea's voice in the mix, as they've been growing some of the seeds that you all grow too, but also just like to see how it operates in different climates and different rotations. And then we'll just dig into some of the questions that are in the chat because um, they're flying in all the directions, and I'm really excited to get there. So, Angela, encourage you if you can while Chelsea's presenting, also listen, you know, but take a peek at some of the questions that came through, and we'll address those soon. Chelsea, you're up.
Hey.
I believe you will be sharing your own.
Right.
Okay, you
I'm
got
gonna
it.
remember how to do this. And yeah. Is that working?
Yeah, I can see it.
Can you see a
Yeah.
photo of a
A truck.
beautiful Toyota pickup? Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all, for it's so wonderful to see and hear about other people's sorghum schemes. Um, and yeah, just not a lot of people I feel like I can talk about it with, so it's great. Um, yeah, so um I am not that far north. Um, and I'm getting a little technical assistance. Okay. I'm actually in Northwest Georgia, just south of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Yes, I should. Okay. Now I can't see the other thing. So yeah, I grew up on a farm. They hadn't grown and processed sorghum for since my grandfather was like 8 years old, so I never really saw it or experienced it, but it was done on this land. And um yeah, so but I kind of came back to farming via academia. I went to college and read a bunch of books and figured out how atrocious our industrial food system was, and kind of been pursuing my own agriculture endeavors ever since then. So for the past 18 years or so. Um yeah, and so most of the focus, I'm back on the family farm now, after lots of travel. And they have a conventional beef cattle operation and hay, but I have carved out about 4 acres here in Peavine, Georgia, for my own diversified farm, with a more agro-ecological approach. And I've been back in this area since 2021. So, but I've been growing sorghum since 2016. And yeah, learned in Western North Carolina with horses. I was drawn to sorghum for mostly because I was to be honest, corn was my first love. And then because of the um I went to visit to work on a farm that was doing corn and sorghum with horses. And there's a lot of, as John was saying earlier, there is a lot of similarity with the field work with those. So um and also former wood-fired baker, so making syrup with wood fire was also very appealing to me. So ponies and fire and sugar was all I'm yeah, 100% there for it. Um but I grow for True Love. I do a little over 20 varieties for True Love um right now, and then so that's kind of the focus of the farm, and then Sugar Drip is one of those. So I do about um a half acre or more of sorghum each year for sweet sorghum for syrup. And then I was doing that for a long time and I was like, I'm cutting these seed heads off. Like I'm touching this stuff so much. Like, and it's food. I would feed it to the chickens or pigs or whatever, but I was like, because I'm also a total grain nerd and do a bunch of different small grain trials and seed work with that. And was like, I would like to eat this. So even though it's sweet sorghum, I've been threshing that out, which we can get into that more, or we will get into that more. It's a little trickier for like when you're harvesting sweet sorghum with you're in the kind of the soft dough stage, but we'll get into that. Yeah. So yeah, I think I kind of covered the why sorghum. Um, and I also it's just really fun to grow really big grass. I don't know. I mean, like I said, like corn was really cool. There's something about being in a field of something that's taller than you. It's very like comforting. I don't know. And also like when I was doing conventional or like doing more of a tillage system, I would underseed with clover. And so that was just like super magical combo. You got the clover carpet, you got the big grass around you, got some like buckwheat insectaries, and it's a nice place to be. So yeah. Um, it's also just great for a crop rotation. It's a really big plant. It does a great job of pulling up a lot of stuff and making it available. It does. I know like a bunch of old timers around here always say like you can put it on your worst ground or whatever, which I mean everything likes to be, in a nice fertile area, but it is a very sturdy, like hardy crop. I mean, especially when you're growing it next to corn. And then corn is a much heavier feeder. And anyway, so it's very resilient, super drought tolerant. And that's some of the things I've been selecting for as well. But yeah, I utilize and also really like using the whole plant. So syrup, grain. I use the crushed cane for mulch, because it doesn't have weed seeds in it, which is really nice. So I'll just either use it like that or I'll use it like straight out of the mill. I'll also use it for I have a hammer mill, or I've also used a like a wood chipper mulcher deal, and I've thrown it through there just to make it like easier to manage around different. I do a lot more mulching now that I'm no-till. Um, Also, the pigs love it. It's great for animal bedding with that. And they also like to snack on it. Um, so, um, I'm going to figure out how to. Okay. So yeah, this is the ponies. This is the first year I ever made sorghum. This is in Western North Carolina. That's Maud, um, is the pony. And so I just wanted to show y'all that process. This was 2016. It's a Chattanooga sorghum cane mill, which I also think that's cool. That's one of the most common brands. And I'm half an hour south of Chattanooga. So, see, there I am, just south of Chattanooga. And yeah, I'm in Walker County. I'm actually in zone 8A, so drastically different from a lot of you folks. We were 7B before 2023. And then this is an old slide from another thing, but I think I pretty much told y'all all of that stuff. So this is planting. We'll just go ahead and get into the technical part of it. I'm doing no-till now. So this is a jab seeder. I do direct seed, obviously. Um, this was my first year doing no-till and without any equipment. So just pretty much a one gal operation out there, with the direct seeding. I will say before that, when I was doing regular tillage operation, I would do moldboard plow, disc, or just disc, depending on the state of things. And then I still have an Alice Chalmers G cultivating tractor, and I had um a furrow. I could make a furrow with that. Um, and so I would just set my rows with the furrow, and then I've used a bunch of different seeders from a bunch of different folks. I still, even when I had a tractor, I still did it by hand because um I was never happy with the spacing on any of the other planters that I used. And it's really critical with sorghum to get that good spacing. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of scrawny cane. And then you don't have a lot of juice. You have a whole lot of work and not a lot of juice. So I would still plant by hand, and then and I still would go over and thin if I needed to. But I'm also, I also have a lot of seed around. So it's like I would, that was um how I would kind of go about that. And then it's gonna let me go. Okay, there we go. This is a no-till, single row no-till drill. This is my buddy. He's planting it for me. This is actually corn, but this worked a lot better. And so that was a lot easier for me when to use that thing. But I still don't have my own planner, and doing the no-till stuff, being at a weird kind of scale in between with the no-till has been a little tricky. But yeah, so that's planting. I just wanted to show this. I don't know if this is an issue for y'all. Do y'all have a sugarcane aphid up there? And have y'all had that?
I don't think I've seen that before.
Okay. It's so this is kind of a climate change thing. Well, it's absolutely a climate change thing. Um, the it's used to only affect sugarcane, so in the tropical areas, but now it's overwintering on Johnson grass,
Oh.
in Texas, and all of these, at least where I am, will get these, Gulf storms in, late summer, early fall, hurricane season, and they'll ride the um the storms, and all of a sudden you'll just be covered in aphids. And it's a specific aphid to sugarcane and sorghum. So that's I got some lady beetles on it. They're taking care of it, but that's been part of my planting situation too, is I'll plant in successions. So um I'll allocate about 1,000 row feet for what I call a run or a batch. Um, and I plant like one succession every week, kind of through the month of May, so that everything's not ready at the same time because it's a whole lot of work when it is ready. But part of what I do to mitigate the sugarcane aphid is I'll plant buckwheat and sectaries in between my successions. So it'll be like buckwheat, sorghum, and just kind of trying to have blooms all the time, as many blooms and many different kinds of blooms also. But buckwheat in particular is really good for predators of the sugarcane aphid. Um, but yeah, I don't know if y'all aren't getting those, that's great. But it's been a huge in the last like 10 years, um, at the National Sweet Sorghum Producers and Processors Association, which I've gone a couple times. Um, but people are just getting completely wiped out by this. Like they are, when it first started happening, they were just like blasting whatever pesticide, like unlabeled pesticides that they had on it and all of this stuff. And I mean, people were losing their people who had like acres and acres and acres of sorghum. And so I am one of the few people that go to the NSSPPA meeting who's not blasting pesticides. But um, that's been an issue with climate change in the last 10 years. It's become a lot of folks have just like completely gotten out of making sorghum. So anyway, I just want to mention that. But if y'all are up there, sounds like you're fine. So don't worry about it.
We are lucky we don't have Johnson grass, so I forgot about that weed.
Oh my gosh. That's so
Um,
nice. I bet you don't have fire ants either. Yeah, it's so nice up there. Um, this is my friend Maya. So this is kind of going along the like growth and processing um uh chronological order. So this is a Maya's looking through a refractometer. And this is a completely analog handy device that folks will use with like they'll use it in vineyards or with other like large scale fruit um production operations, deciding it measures Brix, which is sugar content. So they'll use it to decide when to like do a big harvest of things. Um, so I'll test the cane. Um, once the seed heads are starting to mature, like I'll test, see if they're getting past the milk stage onto the soft dough stage. Um, and then also just because I always grow sugar drip, just have a feel for like how that seed head looks when it's ready for syrup. Um, but I'll also still go out and test and make sure that I'm like climbing up on my Brix. Because you'll reach a point where like peak sugar, where then you'll start to turn into starch. Just as the plant matures, as it's putting its energy into the seed head to fill out that seed. And so this is one of the things I'll cut it like when we harvest it and I'll squeeze it just with like a pair of vice grips onto that plate. And then you look at a light source through it and it has like a graduated um, scale on there, and that helps me determine like how my is going, like where I am in determining where to harvest. Um, and that's like $20 for one of those things. Um, and then this is the next step. We've decided to harvest. So then we strip all the leaves off in the field. So all that biomass is going back on top of the ground. A lot of like old timers in Western North Carolina would even save those and make like they'll like bundle them up and hang them in the barn because there's a lot of tobacco barns down there, and they would feed that out like hay, like they would for hay during the winter months too. So it's a super, nutritious plant, but I just leave it there to return it back to the soil. Um, this is a tobacco knife. This is what I use to harvest. Um, it's what I learned with, and it's just I really enjoy using it. It's like you can't see the whole handle. It's a cut off saw blade on a long hammer handle, essentially. And so it's like it's kind of like a combination of like the beautiful combination of swinging a machete and like a hammer at the same time. And it's very satisfying for like kind of a precision uh harvest with that. I really enjoy using it. It's also nice you can use that bottom part. You can kind of see on this photo, there's like an extra shoot that's coming off here, not mature. Sometimes that'll happen with different stressors, like environmental stressors. And so I'll use the bottom of that knife and just like slice that off because there's not going to be juice in there, and if anything, there's going to be off flavors because um it's not mature. It doesn't have sugar in it, and so that's more stuff to skim out when we're making syrup. Um, so this is the cane mill. Um, yeah, we don't have to listen to my voice. I didn't realize that was on. But so you can see here, this is where on that first video I showed you with the horse and the big like wooden sweep, that's where that would connect. But this one has been geared up to run off of a flat belt pulley. I bought this from a fella like down the road from me. He was in his 70s and it was his grandfather's. So this mill's well over 100 years old. It's another Chattanooga. Um, but he had already done all the gearing up on it. And so the next slide, I think you'll see what's powering the pulley. Um, but yeah, so this is just kind of a close-up of the squeezing the cane. Um, so that's my truck. Um, Willie, it's a 1988 Toyota pickup that I lived out of for a little while. But I got another wheel and I welded big piece of heavy oil pipe onto the rim. And so we just have that jacked up. Willie's in first gear. I have a brick on the pedal and I adjust the RPM that way to have a sweet spot with the mill. So because it's rear wheel drive, you just jack up the back and it doesn't go anywhere. But yeah, so this is since I don't have ponies, I do have this to get my cane crushed. But um yeah, so that's the setup these days. And that's just like a closer shot of that setup um with that. And I just wanted to get a closer of how we strain it. It gets strained a bunch. It gets strained coming out of the mill. You can see here that it's hooked up to a pipeline that I've got going down hill um, to the sugar shack. But this is the first kind of straining. I'll get like at least 20 gallons in here and then open that valve up to send it down to some other holding tanks by the sugar shack, which are these. So I like to let it settle. Um, And just because it lets some of the impurities kind of fall out and some of the starch kind of fall to the bottom so that there's just less to skim. Um, which we'll get to that. So that's also the way that my screen's set up, I can't actually see the chat. So if there's like, and my partner just moves stuff around, so I don't know how, maybe I'll get back there when I'm not sharing my screen, but um, y'all are welcome to holler also to just stop me or slow me down or whatever. Um, but this is it going into the pan. And then this is the wood-fired furnace. We re-mud it every time because we have to jack up the pan I do an open batch pan. Obviously, I don't do the baffled, the continuous evaporator. So we re-mud it to seal it up every time. It looks weird, I guess, but it's a really good, and we reuse the mud, which is nice. So this is a wood-fired furnace. I burn pine because it's hot and fast. You don't want to have big chunks, like big like oak coals in there when you're ready to pull the syrup off. Um, and then these are the skimmers I use, which not a lot of people use these. Um, it works on surface tension. I think there's a better photo. Yeah, so you go down like parallel to it, to the top, and you just kind of kiss the top, and that pulls it off, and you end up saving a lot of juice that way by just getting the stuff that's formed on the top. And the way that firebox is designed, there's a lot of heat in the front, and so that creates this convection current where it's pushing the skimmings like back into the side, which is really nice because then they're not boiling back in because that causes off flavors and potential um, scorching in the pan. Um, More skimming. I took a lot of skimming pictures because you do a lot of skimming. There's just a lot of skimming. So you're getting that chlorophyll and impurities out, so that you're just left with, because it's a big grass, unlike maple syrup where you're just getting the sweet nectar out of not really nectar, but the sap right out of the tree. There's all this other chlorophyll and all these fibers and all these other things that need to come out. This is further along on the cook. This is at the end after it's already been drained. We usually clean the pan with apples after it's been drained. If you dip an apple into warm sorghum foam is like the most wonderful snack. That's yeah, warm sorghum. It's like marshmallow fluff. Um, and anyway, so I'm salvaging what I can before we clean the pan with that into a little coffee cup. And then I feed the skimmings to the pigs. It's one of their favorite snacks. So it's super sweet, but it also still has a ton of like minerals and nutrition there, and they just love it. And then this is the grain. So we've already um, cut the seed heads off before we run it through the mill. And so I use fitted sheets a lot in my schemes just because they hold stuff. Like you don't have stuff like rolling out. This is in my greenhouse. I've just put shade cloth over the top, and this is where I cure a lot of my grain. And it's really important with the sweet sorghum in particular because you're catching it at the soft dough stage to make syrup that you cure it out really well because there's still a lot of moisture in there more than like if you were just harvesting for grain when you would wait for it to be hard dough or just straight up seed. So I've got intake shutters and exhaust fans, but I also have just like a big fan in there also to dry this down. And I'll come in and rotate that around for the first few weeks or first few week or so. And then this is not sorghum, but this is the thresher that I use now. It's a 1975 Almaco plot thresher. it's really nice because you can just throw the seed heads in there. This is some rye that I'm threshing in this video, but it's just like a tiny combine essentially. Like it has a threshing drum in there. Before that, I mean, and still with the seed stock, I still personally do that myself on hardware cloth just because, but this is for like my eating stock. I'll run through the thresher and because I'll usually have like quite a few 100 pounds of that. Um, but I still do the seed for sale is always I do that by hand. Um, and then this is the best way that I have to clean it right now. That's some corn going through there, but um, I'll run it through here. Another tricky thing about the sweet sorghum for grain is like catching it in the soft dough stage. It's still holding on more than like a grain variety that's a little more free threshing. So that's I believe it's called the gloom, which is like what's kind of like hold the mother plant is holding on to the seed with. And so sometimes even going through the seed cleaner, it'll still have the gloom attached, which I don't sell for. So I would love to get a winnow wizard. That's my next dream move. Um, but to be able to clean this and a lot of my other finicky seed as well. So that oh no. And then this I think this is the last slide. But I incorporate the animals a lot. You can kind of see the buckwheat here. And this is actually after I've harvested the sorghum, I've chopped it, it'll send up shoots. Um, and those will frost kill. So this is another way that it works well with my crop rotation is especially doing the no-till now. So I always have a um so as long as it hasn't frosted yet, which also sorghum, like Johnson grass, and other things, when it frosts, it can create prussic acid, and so you're not supposed to graze it after it's frosted. Um, and that so, but I'll get a few grazes across with the sheep, so they'll eat down. Um, they'll get the benefit of that. They're fertilizing my field, but I've gone through and I'll use that jab seeder in between my sorghum stobs. I'll plant my small grain trials because those gets planted in the fall. And so I've got a living root the whole time. I'm getting critters cruising across there and I've got multiple species and I've still got all that mulch from the strip and the cane right there in the field. So these kinds of things bring me lots of joy. when I can figure out how to make those things work. I think I talked a lot about the syrup making process and not a lot about some other stuff, but maybe since I've talked a lot, it would be good to take some questions, if that works for y'all.
100%. Holy smokes. I've learned so much from you all. This is incredible. We absolutely have questions. I'm going to ask Fresh to join me in navigating the questions just because I was a little bit distracted at the front end and I want to make sure we honor all questions. But first off, thank you so much, Chelsea, Jalal, and John, for sharing your experiences. That was huge, really incredible, very exciting. So, I think maybe we can start with some easier questions and then move into some other things. Unless Fresh, you have a recommendation of how to get started, but
No, that's fine. I'm just in the chat looking for all the questions. Yep.
yeah. So I think one of the questions was like, let's get started, right? Like thinking about seed sourcing and for scale, like what's an appropriate scale to get started at? What quantity is like a good way to start? And not like be overwhelming with either saving seed or production of harvest, especially at a hand scale level. And this is going to be open to well and so. and just chime in whenever.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
Like, yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do with it. If you're trying to make syrup, the biggest barrier scale-wise is definitely the mill or the press, I feel like, as far as, getting it squoze, getting it to where you can have juice to then cook down. Um, if you can, squeeze it, then, you can use a pot and cook it. I know Maya has grown my seed out quite a few years, and that's how they were doing it. Um, but and I think they maybe like because the sugar cane, the little mill that y'all had, those are fairly accessible, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
like
They're
a
on
couple hundred
Walmart or
bucks.
Amazon for like $250 or something.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, unlike, you know,
I think you can get it for like $80. I feel
Oh,
like
really?
there's like different scales of it. I mean, I would have to go and see again, but I feel like yeah, the cheapest might be around like 80 to $100.
yeah. But I feel like that's the biggest kind of as far as because that's like being able to make the syrup at least. That's the biggest thing. Like otherwise, you can like I harvest all of my sorghum by hand. Like I use a tobacco knife and cut all my sorghum. I use pruners and cut all the seed heads off. Um, and that's why I do successions because it's a whole lot of work all at once. But I think that as much if you have a way to squeeze it, like you could do like a few rows. I mean, you still would be able to, I mean, just in general, the like juice to syrup ratio is usually like 10 gallons, 8 to 10 gallons of juice makes 1 gallon of syrup. I will say since I've started doing the no-till, I'm getting a far greater yield on syrup from the juice, like
Wow.
almost double. It's insane. Yeah, so that's um I have less cane, but I have like, which is great because then, the more juice you have, the longer it takes to cook. That's just surface area like situation. Um, so I feel like yeah, just the mill or the press is the biggest barrier, but I think you could do, and it depends on if what your end goal is. I mean, I'm not getting rich making sorghum. Like I will be very like frank about that. This is not, I mean, if I were to, it's a lot of work. I like this being in my system. It works well with the the whole picture that I'm trying to do, and it's very important to me to keep this craft alive. Um, and people, I mean, I always sell out of it, but I still have a hard time pricing it because it's like if we're counting for labor here, like it's I don't know how to like I don't think anyone could afford it. Like if it was, just as far, I mean, and that's another scale question. I mean, I know the folks at Muddy Pond, who are like big sorghum makers, they have a machine that just has like it's a whole rig that's a sickle bar mower and a press, and they're just squeezing it straight in the field with like a big tank. I mean, but that's like, that has everything else in it too. But I'm very particular about how I do it. I don't think that answered the question, really.
Did that answer the question, friends? I do have a question because I think is kind of where your thought process went is like, what are harvest yield that you expect, based on like what you're putting in the ground? Like, can you direct seed and expect a yield that's worth it? Like, is it just for the farm, like what you're eating, or how does that contribute to like your farm economy or other things like that? So you could say bushels per acre, or how do you measure that? Or is it gallons per
Yeah.
100-foot row? Like, how are you measuring what your work and labor does?
Yeah. And like it's kind of fluctuated. I'll just speak briefly about this and then I can maybe pass that to y'all. But I, you know, was I've made 50 gallons of syrup off of a half acre before. I would say I'm like averaging 30 to 50 gallons off of a half acre. I plant 1,000 row feet for as a succession, hoping that I have about 80 gallons of juice. That's like a kind of, and so that 80 gallons of juice will cook down to 8 to 10 gallons of syrup. And like I said, that yield has gotten a lot higher with the no-till system, the juice to syrup um, ratio. So, um, yeah, it's still like that's about what I'm doing. And honestly, like I love the crop. Like it's similar to corn, and especially when I was doing it with horses and I was cultivating with the G before that. Um, like once you've got it laid by, and I often would underseed with clover when I would lay it by, I it's just hanging out. Like it's I mean for like a while until it's ready. And it's like all hands on deck and ready to go. So if it's a community of, there's a lot of folks that are interested in it. They want to come see the truck power the mill, like and do, all of that stuff and see what it's about. So if I'm paying people to help me do that, then it's like I'm mostly doing it. I'll pay people to help me harvest. Um, but it's mostly a one gal operation out there. Um, so yeah, that didn't really answer your question either, but I think it has a lot of value that's not just, like I said, I'm not getting rich on sorghum, but it is benefiting my whole system. Um, and like I said, I'm getting the grain and the syrup and all of the benefits with the animals as well. I'm getting pork out of it. I'm getting, like there's all kinds of things that aren't necessarily straight dollars into my hand from a jar of syrup.
Absolutely.
Is
Yeah.
the pork sweeter when they've eaten the sorghum stalks?
Absolutely. Yeah, they get a lot of good snacks. But I don't know because I've only ever had pigs that have had sorghum, so I don't have um a control for that experiment, but the pork's good.
Cool. I've heard the same thing with cattle. I know there's two cattle farms next to us that grow sweet sorghum for their cattle feed, and
They like it.
yeah, I think the sweeter the grass, the better the meat product is.
Uh, Paul and John, would you mind, uh, if you don't have an answer, that's okay, but answering kind of like how it fits into your, on-farm labor and maybe the timing of the season or like how it fits into what you all offer in combination with the other crops you grow?
Jalal always says it's a labor of love. I think that's probably the best way to sum it up. I mean, similar to Chelsea, like it's we're trying to figure out the viability of it, but it's certainly still in a, I would say, research and development phase, and is yeah, relies heavily on, I mean, the thing that's amazing about it is people are so into it, like Chelsea's saying. And actually Maya came up and did a talk with us last year too. She's like one of the great sorghum ambassadors of the world. So yeah, it's never been a problem to find the labor, the volunteer labor to come in and collect the stalks and cut the grain heads off. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think like Jalal's saying, we're going to try to find a balance between continuing to try to mechanize and make it a more viable crop and still maintain the connection to the land for folks, and the yeah, like it's still a cultural project. And I think it always will be.
yeah, yeah. I think because we do both maple syrup and sorghum syrup, and they use similar equipment, the idea is to like, yeah, that we have this like syrup line that we're developing, and the best thing like Chelsea's saying around like sorghum, where it's like maple's 40 to 1, where sorghum is 10 to 1. So the ratio is a lot better. Um, and then it's like we're making grain also from the seed heads. And so we're making this flour Um, we sold the seed sweet sorghum sweet sorghum seed heads to a lot. There's like a ton of breweries up here. I'm not sure about y'all, but New York has like really incentivized breweries. Well, breweries in New York have to buy 60 to 90% of their grains locally. And so, and that there was like a law that passed in like 2012. And so like in the last like whatever that is, 15 years that um like the breweries in New York have like shot up. And so buying local grain is like a big push for breweries and just like for us, I think in general, like the breweries, the bakeries, everybody's like interested in like having access to local grain. And so getting to the scale feels like it's worth it to figure out.
Yeah,
Amazing.
we've grown one variety. I don't know how you, I don't, we've never known how to say it. Courgette, Korjaj, is a landrace variety from Sudan that has like a lot of times with crops, either they have really nice cane or really nice grain. Well, this is an old landrace that has both. And so the flour from that variety is exceptional. And it's it's produces white like white grain heads, and it has a really nice powdery endosperm as opposed to the like sugar drip, for example, which just kind of has that crunch to it and doesn't really have much flour.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fresh.
I was just trying to check the chat, and I think we definitely have maybe more questions than we have time for. But I did want to pop in a couple of the growing questions, and maybe Jalal and John, y'all can answer it because I think these people are also from the a little colder. But one was around direct seeding. Like have y'all direct seeded, and then are you ever interplanting with other crops? And then I think I wanted to throw in if you are if you're growing like to save your own seed, is there a distance that you're keeping those varieties of sorghum away from each other? So maybe you can touch on some of those.
I think we can let Chelsea handle that last one. I think she's a pretty experienced seed grower. We've I already forgot all the questions. Direct
Direct
seeding.
feeding?
We've direct
Direct
seeded
feeding, yeah.
before, and I kind of as a little project at my own farm, I've taken that same variety we were talking about, courgette, and tried to develop like a high bricks direct seeded, like slightly faster line like strain of that. So I have some of that in the freezer still, and we'll probably get that out this year. But yeah, we've direct seeded it, and it does well for us. I actually wonder, like from what you're saying, Chelsea, about the higher yield on juice, if you're getting a higher yield partly because you're direct seeding in addition to the no-till. Like I've wondered if the plant just does better that way, because there's no transplant shock and it can put down a deeper taproot more quickly and that type of thing. Um, but yeah, so we've direct seeded and had success with that. I think we prefer to transplant it just because it feels more, it just, we don't want to experiment too much at once.
Yeah. And I feel like the intercropping, I feel like that's what I've heard around like sorghum initially is that you can intercrop it. Like I think we talked about like Six Sisters. And so on top of like, yeah, corn, bean, and squash, it's like sweet potatoes, sorghum, and peas. And so I've always heard that as like, yeah, the things that love each other, the Six Sisters. Um, and I feel like we've done like black eyed peas. Well, we started like we're starting to like figure it out, like how to do it in our systems. Um, but also like I think, yeah, figuring out the cover crop thing. So like the buckwheat and the clover feels like important that feels like Chelsea figured it out. So yeah. I think the goal is really like the soil health and like the leaves and even like after we press the sorghum stalks, It's called the bagasse, like taking that and kind of like we kind of like mow it over, but like if you have a wood chipper, like putting that bagasse through a wood chipper and like making that into like a mulch. So on top of the leaves, that's like helping to actually build up the organic matter in the soil and the biomass.
Cool. Yeah. My pa calls those pummies, is the bagasse. Kind of
Uh,
like, I think it comes from like pumice, maybe with like wine making or something. I don't know, but that was his job when he was 8. He had to fork the pummies. Um, but yeah, just a quick thing on this seed distance, 200 feet between varieties. Um, yeah. And then I am usually able to harvest the buckwheat um for grain and or cover crop seed from the insectaries. Um, just with a scythe for as far as more pancake forward moves. You can have the buckwheat pancakes with the sorghum syrup.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We love it. We love that. And we haven't had problems with growing the different varieties next to each other. They haven't really crossed for us, but
yeah, yeah, it's supposed to be a self-pollinating crop, and like all self-pollinating crops, a certain percent will cross, and so we've seen some off types, but not anything. It's not like, oh, this whole line is ruined because it all crossed with something. Like it's pretty self-isolating.
especially like the black African, that like stays black. We've seen a little bit, but for the most, this is the one variety, black African, that's just like that is black seeds that come out. Um, and
I've honestly never had to worry because no one else is growing sorghum, and I only grow the sugar drip. So that was just the recommendation on isolation distance from True Love. So
yeah,
I've heard it can cross with Johnson grass or sorghum Sudan, but I've never seen it.
the one thing that we okay, so the one thing I wanted to mention is that our soil is sandy where we're growing at, and we noticed the difference on like between the sandy and the clay, that it does a lot better in our clay soil than our sandy soil. And so we've just been trying to like make sure that we have more organic matter in our sandy soil. The one variety that has like done well in both soils is Simon. It's like a sweet variety that last year we just noticed that sweet variety was growing well in both soils. And so um, I think there's another sorghum grower, this guy Carl Batt has like Empire syrup, and he's only doing Simon. Like he tried a bunch of other different varieties, but he just loves Simon as far as like the yield and like the production of it. Um, and I think we're also just trying to figure out, yeah, growing for taste too. And so what is the best variety that tastes the best? Um, so I know there's like Stone Barns that has been growing it for taste. And so trying to figure out what are the taste varieties. Um, and Carl does a syrup that he calls it ice that that is after the frost. Um, And we pressed a little bit after the frost last year. But we've also heard that, yeah, it's not,
The
yeah,
flavor goes down.
the flavor goes down and the plants are dying. So we kind of like straddle like right before the frost. So like for us, our frost is like regularly around like October 15th. And so our harvest date is like first week of October. Um, so Yeah. We plan around like the first or second week of October and just like, if we haven't gotten everything by like whatever the 15th of October and it hasn't frosted yet, then we'll keep going. And if we do have a frost, we'll frost. We'll like harvest right after that, but after like a few weeks, everything is that bad.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that? Because I think in the Midwest, like we definitely depend on frost dates to influence our harvest time. So like I'm looking at beans and you know, like milling corn or popcorn to be like the last thing. It gets to be the last thing on my radar because it can get through the frost period. So what is your experience with sorghum over those temperature differences, and like where does the quality drop? It for grain or for syrup or for both?
Yeah, I don't know that we've harvested. I mean, the grain is a different story because it can theoretically take the frost, and as long as it's at a certain level of maturity, probably late dough stage, it's like corn in that sense. But I don't think we have a ton of experience with that. I mean, we're kind of doing the same process that Chelsea is in the sense that we're trying to press the cane, and so we end up clipping them early, and so then they need to dry in the greenhouse. So one of the things we are trying to find or look for eventually will be something that matures more quickly, a grain variety that matures more quickly so that we can get it in and get it out faster, so it reaches maturity sooner. This the I would say the cane quality goes down pretty quickly. Like after, like I don't, I know Carl's doing his
Nice.
the ice situation, but we haven't had the window. I think is pretty quick for that. Like for like I think you maybe you get one frost and you got to get it the next day, but if you get another frost after that, the quality drops really quickly from what we've seen.
Yeah, it almost like
It's not good.
it's bitter fermented like
It
stalks.
just tastes watery and
Yeah.
you know the sweetness has gone out of it.
Yeah, the sweetness is gone. It tastes bad, and we were just like, yeah, we had a bunch that we were gonna press, and then it was just like, no, we can't. Like we tasted the stalks. We was like, no, this is too far gone.
Yeah, and
And it was like maybe it like frost. It was like maybe too hard for us, and we were just like, oh yeah, it's gone. It's
yeah,
done.
and what Chelsea's saying is important, which is the piece around you can't graze your animals on it because of that compound.
Yeah,
Yeah, prussic acid.
There
yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
Fresh, do you want to plug in a question or can I ask another question? Do you have something on mind? We're way over time, so already we're grateful and we just want to, one, thank you so much. This is incredible. Also, thank you, Zong Cheng, for interpreting for farmers in Milwaukee and farther. I think one of those really fun questions to ask is like, what are your field tests? I think oftentimes we're learning stuff from, you know, text sheets online or extension or someone else, but like, what are your like go-to field tests for like when you get to harvest stage for grain or syrup? Are you like tasting it in the field? These are like things that I think a lot of farmers that like I do is just like I rely on my instincts, and so I'm curious if you have any recommendation there, and then maybe just as a closing, like you know anecdote about not being afraid to try this crop. Does it feel in the field? You know.
I'll let y'all go first.
I would say I feel like I'm just learning this, you know, like we've done it. I worked at a farm in Maryland that grew it and like have been experimenting on my own and then with, you know, and obviously with Jalal, and I just feel like we're just starting and so there hasn't been like our grain extension person here was like, someone tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work, and that's kind of all we've really gotten from it. And so it really has just been, you know, success. I mean, like experimenting and trying to figure out what works. And I learned a lot from Chelsea tonight. It's really interesting to think and understand the different levels of maturity for the different varieties. And and I you all have a completely different window down there, whereas like we're just trying to squeak the crop in past the finish line before frost. And we've definitely noticed that it's the plants respond to changes in daylight. So that seems to be in a piece around adapting it here. Um, but I would say we've definitely had enough success to keep trying like with the work that Chelsea's doing and Maya and Nate Kleinman and True Love, like there's really a lot of interest and momentum around it. And it's also probably worth mentioning that I'm pretty sure the USDA awarded somebody a huge there's the USDA has a huge research grant on sorghum right now that they're working on in I think outside of the botanical garden. Maybe it's the botanical garden in St. Louis. So there's been like tens of millions of dollars being put into developing sorghum, which is not there right now. So like what Chelsea's saying about it being a corn being a high feeder, I'm kind of wondering if they're going to try to do the same thing with sorghum varieties, where they kind of we can develop these super varieties that are dependent on chemical fertilizer. I think that's what's kind of amazing about it right now is that it's still very much in a farmer driven form as far as I can tell, as opposed to like a seed company driven form.
Hmm.
And of course, they grow a lot of what they call it Milo out in Kansas as animal feed. So it's not like there's been no sorghum breeding work, but what we're talking about for cane sorghum is largely unadulterated as far as I can tell. That was a long answer.
Jalal, do you want to say anything? Mhm.
No, I think yeah, we've been trying to figure out the testing in the field, like what Chelsea's talking about with the refractometer to kind of really see the sweetness through that. And so I think there's still a little of like learning, okay, like how can we actually tell which plants are sweeter than others without the refractometer? But right now it's definitely like testing and seeing through that. Um, and yeah, I don't know, Chelsea, if you have anything else around like field knowledge around sorghum.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as far as harvest, kind of what we talked about, I do like every single, like I said, I'll start testing with the refractometer, like a handful of stalks, like every week or so, getting close, just to kind of track my curve. Um, but I still taste every single one of those stalks. Just because I mean, I usually will taste it and then look at the refractometer just to like, because I like to guess and see what it's gonna be. But yeah, and I think because I'm so familiar with the sugar drip variety in particular, that's the only variety I've grown for uh 10 years now. That's like how it begins to like it gets its amber color. And but also I'm testing those seed heads too. Like I'm testing at the bottom of the seed head, in the middle of the seed head, and the top of the seed head, where like I'm averaging soft dough. Um, and yeah, so that's most of it. Is yeah, lots of senses involved, and just getting to know a plant and getting to know that rhythm. And then the refractometer is just nice to have some reassurance too, to be like, because it is it's like we're fixing to cut this whole field of cane. Like, I hope it's where it needs to be. It's always nice to have. It's like when we're cooking the cane or when we're cooking the juice, I still have like three different thermometers that I'm using to just because I mean it's overkill. It's absolutely overkill. Or I'm like, oh, maybe that one's wrong, but. And I will use a Hybrix refractometer also sometimes at the end for the syrup, but we're not talking about that. Um, yeah, and then I guess just as like, what was the second question was like, why do sorghum?
I mean, we've been going through that, but just like how it, yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, because it's
Or
great.
the inspiration to get us not afraid to try to just grow it or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Inspire
it's
us.
yeah, it's an amazing plant. Even if you just like grow it and you don't like make syrup, it's still just a phenomenal plant. You can save the seed or not. You can like just get to know it. But yeah, and you can also just like cut it and like gnaw on it. like how they, you can like use a pocket knife and like scrape the really tough exterior off, and you can just gnaw on it like sugar cane. Like that was like what they give kids a lot. Like around, I mean, just like a thing to like chew on and suck on or whatever, but just to get to know it. But yeah, if you can find a way to squeeze it and make syrup, by all means. It seems like that's fairly accessible on a small scale. But I think it adds a lot to, it's great for crop rotation. It's great if you have like animals as well, being able to like kind of, because a lot of the drive with my farm too is to have a low input situation. And I mean, and I don't irrigate, I'm selecting for stuff for, you know, flavor and resilience. So being able to have something, having a bunch of different species that are manageable, but just maintaining that diversity for your soil health, diversity for all the critters above the soil. And I mean, it is I think it is gaining traction, especially with more kind of like gluten sensitivity things that are coming up. Like there's more kind of demand for the grain. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but um, I think y'all should definitely give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jalal was just reminding me too, like we do bite the grain in the field to see where it's at, you know, which I
Yeah,
think is like tale as old as time, right? Humans have been doing
yeah,
it long before we had moisture readers.
right, right, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know more than you know.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so true. You know more than you know, and like everybody's ancestors did this. Everybody's ancestors stood in a grain field somewhere in the world and gnawed on something to be like, should I harvest this yet? So it's a universal thing.
Yeah. And I think for me, um, our first like grow out, the experience of doing it, it felt very ancestral. I don't know if I
Mhm.
told you this fresh, but like just like that whole practice of like taking the leaves off and like chopping the stalks down, like I like felt like I did that before. Like it wasn't like it felt very like I felt very connected to the plant. And so I really like really impress people to just try it and like get that connection for themselves. Cause I just like felt that connection and just like have been getting to like more in love with the plant as we've grown it more and more. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think that's a perfect place to pause this conversation because I want to encourage you all to stay engaged, but I want to also respect the evening of the time of the farmers that we have on um, this conversation. So thank you, Jalal, John, Chelsea, Song Chang. Thank you so much for all being here and supporting this group of curious and passionate farmers. And I am hopeful that when we reconnect, maybe in a month, actually, it's a couple weeks, for our next call, we're going to be chatting about some dry bean production, but also there's plenty of ways to engage in the Hudson Valley and in down south and everywhere around here to like talk about these food crops that are really important to us. Because you just said it, like when you are in the field as a farmer, you know how important this stuff is, right? So let I hope that we can all leave together with that feeling, with the excitement that is spring and that is gonna like bring us and return us to some of these really important and super powerful crops. So thank you so, so much. I will hang on for like 2 minutes for people that have direct questions, but our guests and everyone else, please have a wonderful and beautiful evening. Thank you.